And good morning, everybody. Welcome to Martechify, our community. For those who've joined us before, welcome back. Glad to see you here. And a special thank you, as Kyle said, to our expert panel of the day. I'll do a brief introduction here for our panelists, and then as they each move into their segments toward the middle of the session, they may share a few more things about their backgrounds as well. Let me start with Faylene. Faylene's the Director of the Digital Marketing Platform Operations for NVIDIA. Many of us know NVIDIA, but for those who don't, NVIDIA is a maker and seller of video cards, video equipment for computers. So Faylene will do a much better job of describing that, but welcome, Faylene, and I'm excited. We're going to hear some insights around platforms and stack architectures and how to bring that together. She goes very deep there. Also like to welcome Marissa Eddings, who's a director of content publishing for 7-Eleven. And she will be coming in from the content side. How do we bring together content to optimize experiences for our customers? 7-Eleven's a complex arena. We're going to hear from her around how to think about the content, how to strategize that, and how to think about audiences and bringing it all together. And Maxine Eiland is our Senior Director of Digital Marketing and Web for SailPoint. SailPoint may be less familiar to some of us, but it is an identity management platform, high tech. So she's joining us from Austin. We'll be hearing particular insights from her around how to bring together data to enable personalization and against a very sophisticated challenge, which is B2B personalization using account-based marketing strategies. So I'm excited. All three of the women here are fabulous in my book, and I think they're going to each bring in important perspectives from different directions, and together I think hang on for a wild ride here. I think it's going to be very, very interesting. Let's move forward a slide. So just to introduce our subject for today, we're building from our last session, which was September, building smarter campaigns with better data, and we leaned into kind of integrative thinking, how to bring data together to enable better customer engagement and smarter campaigns. Today's session is personalization for web and beyond, and in some ways I think of this as an extension of our last conversation. Smarter campaigns, smarter engagement is one thing. Now, personalizing experiences, especially in a finer-grained way, is a challenge that many organizations moving into more sophisticated marketing and martech are dealing with. Today's session will move from some upfront framing conversation just to get our ears and our minds set for the deeper discussion. Our expert panel will move in and share use cases and scenarios, and they will take some conceptual things from our framing discussion and turn it into very tangible real-life learning. Following that, we'll have some dialogue with the panelists to process insights and learnings and questions, and in the end, we'll have a summary and wrap-up. Now, as we're having our live conversation with the video and audio, there will be a parallel conversation going on in the chat channel. So I'd like to encourage everybody, if you haven't already, make sure you have your chat window open in WebEx. There's going to be a dialogue going on there, hopefully a lively one. Vanessa is our chat moderator. You may hear her asking questions, or others of us may ask questions as we go. Feel free to share insights, ask questions, provide further commentary. We'll be watching that and bringing some points from the chat into the live dialogue as we go. So if you haven't done anything else yet, please get into the chat channel and at least introduce yourselves and where you're from, and that'll get the chat warmed up. All right, let's move ahead. So personalization for web, we're talking about creating relevancy for engagement and conversion in a web experience, but then there's and beyond, which is the next slide. Once we go beyond the web, we're talking about creating a total experience for the customer, recognizing who they are and what their needs are, and we're aiming toward building and sustaining customer relationship value. At least that's how I think about it. There's been a lot of web personalization in play for years now. Full integration across channels is a more challenging subject, and we'll be speaking to both dimensions today. Let's move ahead a slide. So I'd like to put out a few thoughts up front, again, to get our brains primed and kind of the conversation grounded. I'll share a few thoughts, and I'll invite our panelists. If they have insights or builds on what I'm sharing, please jump in and share your thoughts as well. So when I think about personalization for web and beyond, I think there are 4 critical factors that need to be kept in mind. One is strategy. There's all kinds of things you can do in terms of personalization, but making sure you're doing the doing inside of a well-grounded strategy is a huge deal. So well-grounded, well thought out, and well fitted. Strategies need to fit the organization that's doing the execution. So we'll speak to that more. Data. Personalization just doesn't live up in a website. It's enabled through the data. And so we need actionable data signals that can be activated by the various components in the Martech stack. Activation then, of course, is the third piece. How do you get the full stack? Automation tools, web, e-commerce, and beyond. How do you get that working together? Very sophisticated challenge there. And then finally, there's process that needs to be thought about. How do you keep advancing both the tech and the architecture and the data, as well as the organization and the human processes that surround all of this? So I think there's 4 headlines here. We'll move into 4 slides here just to go a step deeper. The first being strategy. And I'll rattle off a few questions, strategic questions here, and then panelists, if you have commentary on this, please jump in. So first of all, why personalize? Personalization can be hard work. What kind of personalization are we driving for, and for what purpose? Extremely important is targeting what business results. I think good guidance is before you embark on a personalization exercise, make sure you know what you're playing for and you know what business results being targeted. Another point, how much is enough? How fine-grained should the personalization be? But there is such a thing as too much. How much is too much where you're trying to overdo it and over-complexify the marketing? And that can become a serious trap. In the end, we want well-fitted strategies that fit the tech, fit the data, and fit the organization. So, panelists, any thoughts on that? Any builds?
I think when you're thinking about how much is enough or how much is too much, there's always the creepy factor, right? Knowing what color someone's hair isn't important, but knowing kind of the content that they've been interested in or how they've been engaging in your site. So making sure that you are tying it all to your business and you're not over personalizing in a way that makes people feel uncomfortable. We can do that now with a lot of the technologies that are in place. So I think that's just something to be cautious about.
Great point, Maxine. Thank you.
Yeah, I would just add to that also resource management. We could personalize so many different ways at 7-Eleven, but we can only do what we can do. When you have thousands of products and, many, many different customer segments, it could become extremely complex. So just trying to figure out how to find that right balance.
Perfect. We only can do what we can do. Then we ought to write that down. Make a slide out of that. I love it. Why don't we move ahead a slide? Let me get to the data. Hugely important, especially if we're trying to personalize across channels. So one of the first questions or thoughts is the data siloed, or do we have a unified data set? And this is a serious challenge for many organizations. There's a question around granularity of the data versus manageability. There's some ways to try to harness data where you're pulling in so many tiny granules that it's hard to act upon, and which kind of leads to the next point, raw data versus refined signals. You could have billions of data points, but it could be so sprawling that it's difficult to execute. Refined signals, it would be a smaller set of data points, but more actionable. We'll speak about this in more depth. And then data there is an upkeep dimension here. So many organizations are using manual or batch processes to do upkeep on the data. Many organizations are moving toward more automated, continuous data flow management, more sophisticated subject. And that whole arena is well on the move. In the end, we're driving for well-harnessed data that's highly actionable. Any builds on this game? Maybe not. I'll keep going. So far, so good. Activation. So activation needs to start somewhere. What is the most important and first place where personalization needs to happen? For many organizations, it's the web. But for some, it's the campaigns. And the personalization needs to happen in the automation. Others, it's not just web, it is e-commerce. So starting where is a great big deal. That kind of forms a foundation. From there, we start doing some critical integrations. What is the next layer or the next dimension or the next channel of personalization? The point here around central versus edge, there are some tech stack architectures, martech architectures, where personalization type decisioning happens toward the center of the stack. Perhaps there is a real-time interaction management system driving the personalizations across channels. In other places, it's in the edge. Maybe the data is well harnessed and consistent, and then each component in the stack is doing its own personalization but feeding off the same data. But in the end, though, we want well harnessed and well organized activation. And I'll keep going. Process. So when we get to process, this is now just not just tech, not just data, it's also human and organizational. So at Ascend, we put a high focus on KPIs. You can tell whether processes are working based on well-constructed KPIs. Data flow management is its own type of process thinking. The stack and the components being used for personalization, we like to think in terms of evolution and a stepwise evolution rather than a big bang type of approach. And while all the tech and data are advancing the organization, sophisticated personalization that's cross channels is hard work organizationally, and every organization we see is in some stage of evolution. And our kind of overarching thought here is continuous learning is the central point. How do you can create and sustain a learning process?
And just to add on to that, Rich, I was just going to say, getting buy-in from other organizations is also really important as part of that, and educating them on any kind of changes that you're doing, how they might be receiving leads, just explaining how the quality of the leads are improving, even if they might be decreasing. So I know sales sometimes can get a little bit concerned if suddenly they go from, 1,000 leads to 500, but if those 500 are more qualified and much more ready to talk to you, then they're much more effective leads. And so I think making sure that you're explaining all that stuff at the forefront and really getting that buy-in and that support will really make the process and everything so much smoother as you kind of build it out.
That's a huge point, Maxine. So, sales and marketing buy-in and trust in the data is a huge deal. Other organizations will deal with various product teams that are trying to get their products out there and making sure that there's high trust, both across products and across a portfolio of marketing and across sales. Huge deal.
Yeah. And I'll just chime in too, if it's okay. I think as part of the process that we are definitely having to make sure we constantly update because we have a global presence, GDPR and privacy laws are really important, and they're constantly changing, I feel. So we're constantly having to adjust our process with how we're collecting the data, going, through all of the opt-in, opt-out kind of procedures, and seeing what changes in the law require us to change how we're managing that data. So that's something that's constantly changing for us.
Absolutely. Great point. Well, that warms us up, Faylene. I think we're going to move into now the demonstrations and use cases. And first up is Faylene. So why don't we move ahead a slide? And Faylene, as I mentioned before, feel free to share a little more about your background and/or your recent experience and whatever might be helpful for the participants here.
Sure. I'll just echo kind of what was mentioned before. I'm Director of Digital Marketing Platform Operations at NVIDIA. And just to elaborate a little bit more about who is NVIDIA, yes, we're known as, big players in the gaming industry. But over the last 25 years, we really have expanded into other industries. So we're doing lots of great things when it comes to artificial intelligence, autonomous driving, and now we power some of the world's fastest computers. So we do a lot in our organization, and we're based here in Silicon Valley in California. So next slide, I'll jump into some best practices. Okay, so I wanted to share some of our personalization approaches on the web here at NVIDIA. Our strategy, it's really about personalizing to help with targeted messages for new customers and existing customers. And it's about keeping our existing customers also informed and engaged about new solutions that we're offering. So that's really why we personalize and the reason why we have our marketing tech stack set up as such. When we think about our personalization, our KPIs are critical because our KPIs and why we have to do the personalization, it's tied to our revenue, it's tied to our acquisition and retention goals. So we actually do lots of personalization for our business units within NVIDIA. And I actually work in our digital marketing organization, and we support our business units when it comes to marketing, campaigns, execution, strategy, et cetera. So now let me show you some of the technical flow, or let me go deeper into this diagram I have in front of you. It's really kind of the flow behind our personalization approach at NVIDIA, and this is how we assign visitors to audience segments, which is critical. It's kind of step one before you even get to see a personalized message on our page. So you can see here we've got lots of different data sources, we have databases, and we actually look at a lot of different segments. So we look at industry segments, geography, company IP addresses. So NVIDIA actually targets both B2B and B2C customers. So we have both business and consumer customers that we're constantly targeting and offering solutions for. So from all of those data sources, we actually do have a lot of marketing tools in our toolkit, and it makes up our marketing tech stack. It's very, very important for us to integrate all of these tools together to help us have this personalized experience. So we use content management system tools, CMS, and we use Adobe primarily for a lot of our tools. So we use Adobe Experience Manager that helps us with a lot of our web-specific personalization. We also have email. We also have webinars. So we have lots of different marketing tactics when it comes to the whole personalization flow. We also have our version of our site in English. We translate that into 30 different languages. So we have other versions of our site available to customers. So we have an NVIDIA site in Chinese. We have an NVIDIA site in Russia. So that capability also requires another marketing tool. So we have machine learning, global translation tools, and partners that we work with. So when customers go to that actual page, they're seeing a unique experience based upon the targeting that's behind that layer. Next slide. So the next example comes from AT&T. And I was at AT&T, and I was director of e-commerce and the digital experience organization for 6 years, and that's where I was prior to coming to NVIDIA. So I wanted to just share an example of the chatbot technology that we implemented at AT&T. AT&T spent quite a bit of time analyzing actual customer behavior on our web experience before we even implemented a chatbot. And what we looked at was activity that customers had when they would go to our billing page, or they would start looking at their usage online, and if there were some overage charges. What customers were doing is they actually were going online, maybe going to pay a bill and look at what was happening, and then would turn around and call customer service. So our KPI and why we had to come up with a personalization strategy was all tied to reducing costs. And we wanted customers coming online specifically to stop calling customer service. So there had to be a way for us to inject a reason to help them online. So that's what we did with this chatbot. We actually implemented that on our billing pages or our usage pages, using a lot of that data before we implemented the bot to help us with the logic and the rules around prompting the customer. Are you having overage issues? Do you know about this feature? Do you need help troubleshooting? Those are some of the things that we leveraged when we implemented that chatbot at AT&T. Next slide. So when you think about web personalization, I think we're all here sharing examples and we make it look easy. But there are challenges still, I think, on a day-to-day basis of just how to get all this done successfully. One thing I want to just call out, and it kind of piggybacks on the GDPR, is data governance. You also have to make sure all the data coming in is accurate and what's going out. So that's really important, and have a process and team that's looking at that and making sure that's part of the process. The other point is organizational silos. If you have a sales organization that's not really aligned with the marketing organization, you could be targeting the same customer, which you don't want to do. So it's important that the organizations are aligned and that data is matching within the system so that you know, like, what is the contact history? How many times has our sales force reached out to this customer, and then we're going to turn around and send them 5 emails and then show all this personalization on the site? It can be overkill. So that's really important to look at the organizational elements of it. And then the last piece is measurement of all these personalization approaches and techniques. Sometimes it's very challenging because you've got an email message that went out, but that email message was really based upon the webinar that they attended, or that could be based upon that customer or that visitor who went to the site and we retargeted them. So there's all these different things going on in this omni-channel world that makes it a little tricky when you look at measurement and effectiveness based upon which of those things really drove that customer to that action. I think that's all I had for today. Unless
really good. Can I ask a quick question, Faylene?
Sure.
Yeah, great. Thank you. To me, what's striking about the challenge at NVIDIA is that you have a whole portfolio of products and you have a whole world full of varying customers and segments, product interests, etc. How do you think about that? How do you approach that so that you can tell whether you're putting the right product in front of somebody based on what their likely interests are?
Yeah, great question. So at NVIDIA, we actually have a separate enterprise marketing organization, and we have a separate consumer marketing organization. Both of those organizations partner with us. So I would say a lot of the heavy lifting is done by those business units, and they're looking at and dissecting which products make the most sense. So like a data center product might be applicable to the enterprise customer, and there's a whole list and approach around which enterprise customer already has this type of data center. And then the consumer aspect, you've got all the gaming experiences. So we just launched a gaming streaming service available to consumers that they can actually pay and subscribe to. So there's lots of different strategies behind if you want to upgrade a particular consumer from a free service to maybe paying the $9.99 fee. So those organizations really drive a lot of the why and who. Then they come to me and my group in the digital marketing organization, and we execute it. So that's kind of the partnership we have.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much, Faylene. Love it. And everybody participating, if you have more questions about what Faylene shared, please put them up in the chat. That's what it's for. And we can have an active dialogue there as we shift to the next section here. And so welcome, Marissa. And like Faylene, feel free to share a little bit more about yourself and your background, and we're eager to hear what's going on at 7-Eleven.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, I'm really excited to be here with you guys today, and I'm excited to share what we're doing at 7-Eleven. We're really in the middle of a huge digital transformation there right now, so a lot is going on. I've been there for about 2.5 years and came on really to take on content and how do we think about content publishing with our own channels. And so that's really the focus of my role. But I want to start with a question for the chat, actually. My question to you guys is, when you stop at 7-Eleven, what is your favorite thing to buy? Like, what's your must-have 7-Eleven go-to product? I'll start because I have one. Mine is definitely Diet Dr. Pepper Big Gulp. So I would love to know what you guys think. And while you're doing that, while you're putting in your chat answers, I'll give you some just basic 7-Eleven stats. So we have about 9,000 stores in the U.S. and over 71,100 stores worldwide. We're known for a lot of firsts. We pioneered the convenience store concept way back in 1927 here in Dallas, actually. And we were the first convenience store to be open 24 hours. But I think the one takeaway of first that we have is that we're the first retailer to offer to-go coffee. So that's a little fun fact for you today. We were the OG when it came to go coffee. That was in 1964. So I'm interested to see what we're seeing here. Slurpee, yep, Cherry Big Gulp, Gas, coffee, Frosty, Diet Coke, let's see, sandwich, egg salad sandwich. There's a huge cult following, by the way, for our egg salad sandwich. So I'm glad to see that one. That's really, really cool. But I really just wanted to do that to also kind of demonstrate why we need personalization at 7-Eleven, because people come to our stores for so many different reasons. One thing we do know about customers, though, is that trips to our store are pretty much unplanned visits. People don't really plan a trip to 7-Eleven. They don't do their research about our products online. They're typically on their way to work or on their way shopping or doing something else, and they stop at a 7-Eleven maybe for gas and to run in and grab all of these products that you guys mentioned. And so it's really important for us to not only be top of mind, obviously, but also to reach our customers through mobile channels while they're out and about, like app push notifications, marketing banners inside our apps, email, and SMS. And so that's not to say we aren't prioritizing an enhanced web experience as well. There's a project underway now to completely overhaul our website and really doing the foundational work around mapping those customer journeys on web. But for this session, I really want to focus on our CRM channels, because that's where we're already starting to shift to a personalization strategy. So if you go to the first slide, I'll take you through what is really an almost real-time case study, because this is still a work in progress for us and for our team. But to set some context, we're fairly early in our personalization journey. When I joined 2.5 years ago, CRM comms were managed completely by an external agency. And last year, in 2019, we centralized all of our data into a data lake. We migrated all of the CRM comms management in-house. We're now using Salesforce. And in those 18 months or so, we've done a ton of foundational work. We've created trigger journeys. We've deployed campaigns with like local gas prices using movable ink, other variable data. So we have started to do some of those different types of emails that include some level of personalization, but the majority of our send volume still had been ad hoc emails to very large populations with very minimal targeting. And as you can see in this left column, 7-Eleven has a pretty complex business. So we have hundreds of offers on food and beverage products every month. Many of those are regionalized, or sometimes they're even a test happening in one or two markets. We have our own private brand portfolio that's growing very rapidly. So I don't know if you're familiar with 7 Select or our cold pressed juice. We have a ton of products in store that are private brands. We're also known for partnering with movies and other properties for these large tentpole activations. This picture is specifically from Deadpool 2. That was a couple of years ago. Last year was Detective Pikachu. And then we launched delivery a few years ago. And that business has grown significantly this year in light of COVID, as you can imagine. But we also deliver through partners like DoorDash and Postmates. And then we have this incredibly robust loyalty program called 7 Rewards that's also experienced pretty rapid growth over the last few years. It just launched about 3 or 4 years ago. So we're currently managing 2 separate apps. We have the 7 Now app for delivery, and then we have the 7-Eleven app. And the 7-Eleven app is what houses our rewards program, our fuel loyalty platform, digital wallet, mobile checkout. So we have a lot to tell our customers. There's so much information here, and each one of these initiatives has product owners and business category owners behind it who are all vying for attention with our customers. And so it's really no surprise if you look at this middle column that our comms send volume increased nearly 4x from January through July of this year. And with an increase like that, we also saw a decrease in open rates, which, of course, the team, we had hypothesized would happen based on just experience in CRM. But now we have the proof point to show that is what happens. If you look at the third column on the right, this is a data set from 4 emails that were deployed around the same time, and that's where you can really see that inverse correlation between targeting and open rates. So targeting obviously results in lower send volumes, but our engagement rates are much higher. And so while the CRM team, we knew that we needed to explore personalization, we finally had the data we needed to support that shift in strategy, because going to our business category partners and telling them that we were going to be sending, fewer emails or fewer communications to some customers was not really something they wanted to hear, right? Like they want their messages going out to as many people as possible, as often as possible. They would have us sending something to them every day if we could. But we need to protect those customers and their time and make sure that we're sending them the right message. And so that's something we've really tried to communicate to those business partners. Our process to date had really been one where those partners actually were requesting comms too, and for the most part we were accommodating those requests without much strategic input. So we had kind of gotten ourselves into a position where that had become the norm. And so this is a big shift for us. We're kind of turning a ship around on how we're doing this. So you can go to the next slide. And just to provide a little bit more context, CRM or loyalty marketing, we call it CRM at 7-Eleven. Other places I've worked at, you would not call it CRM. CRM is something different, but loyalty marketing basically is managed across multiple functional teams. So we have strategy, we have an insights team, publishing, and in-house creative, which is the team that I sit on, and then our data partners in IT. So it's really managed like a cross-functional pod. So for those of you familiar with agile methodologies, it's basically a pod structure, and that structure is what enabled the team to align really quickly to a new approach. We also have pretty limited resources across those teams, so combining personalization with this templated creative approach is what also allowed us to deploy this strategy more quickly. So our objective here really was to combine this modular email template, which I'll show you and walk you through on the next slide, but with the right level of personalization in order to serve modules to those customers who will find that content most relevant. And over time, we hope to regain their trust in the content we're sending them through this approach. So looking at the right, we can have 3 steps here. Our first step was really just assessing what we could do now, knowing that we have some opportunities for more sophistication in our MarTech stack. We actually can't currently do automated data pulls from the data lake, but we didn't want the fact that we aren't quite there in terms of where we need to be with our MarTech stack to also stop us from making progress when it comes to personalization. We wanted to make sure that we were still able to prove out that this actually works. And so we knew that the tech piece of it would be the biggest limiting factor in how far we could personalize right now. So we really started there and said, what can we do? How many data pools can we do, per communication? What's our capacity? And once we were able to determine that, it really drove the level of granularity that we were able to achieve at this point. And then from a creative and content standpoint, we built those templates, these modular templates, where the creative could all work together or separately based on the look and feel, so that it feels like a cohesive email when you do get it based on which tiles you're getting. So just really making sure that that piece of it worked as well. The next step was that we had to reevaluate our process. And so, as I mentioned, our process to date had very much put us in a position where we were kind of taking these requests, fulfilling them. We're now actually planning months in advance with our brand strategy and our partnership marketing teams to create a calendar, proactively create a calendar that we will share with our business partners that has customer-focused content. It still supports all of our key business priorities, but it does it in a way that also connects those priorities with the right customers in the right way. And that calendar will be shared and aligned to and approved before any briefs are created. And then lastly, and I would say most importantly, was just communicating this change in strategy to our internal stakeholders and to our entire marketing team. Our marketing team is about 60 people, and many of them don't touch this process. They're not involved in it. But we felt like it was important for everyone to know exactly what we were doing, what our journey looked like, and make sure that they, had that awareness, just so that if it came up in their conversations with business partners as well, we were all on the same page. So our plan is to deploy the strategy as a test. We'll do 50% to our loyalty membership base and maintain a 50% control through November, at which time we'll actually share the analysis back with our partners and with the team. And we'll be closely watching open and click-through rates, obviously, because those are really something we can see quickly, and we know they're leading indicators of success. But the real KPIs here will be how the Stripe impact to the store through sales and through 7 Now delivery orders. We know that's what our partners care about. We know that's really the most important piece, and so that's what we'll be focused on. If you want to go to the next slide, here's just a quick snapshot to show you a simplified version of how the modular email template will work. Instead of a large member base getting a national offer or sending a few different discrete emails with different regional offers, the content for this email will really be tailored to the individual receiving it. And so just to go through an example, I'm in Dallas. Let's say I'm under 21 because it's my example and I can be whatever age I want to be. And I have ordered delivery through 7 Now in the past. I actually order it pretty frequently. So in that example, I would get this email that you see on the right. I would get the 69-cent Big Gulp offer. I would get a 2 for $5 Red Bull offer. I would get the ready-to-bake delivery tile for 7 Now, letting me know that I can get a pizza delivered to me that's ready to bake. And then I would get this last shop with confidence tile. So let's say I have an imaginary friend who lives in Long Island, over 21, has never ordered from 7 Now. He would actually get the 79-cent coffee happy hour offer with a specialty coffee, so specialty coffee offerings in Long Island. He would get the $5 off White Claw offer because he's over 21. And he would actually get an offer for $7 off his first 7 Now delivery. So that's our acquisition offer for delivery. And then he would get the Shop with Confidence tile as well. So this email actually deployed yesterday, which was very exciting for us. It was our first kind of attempt at it. We'll continue to iterate on this. We're going to obviously explore day parting, which is very big for 7-Eleven. We use movable ink, and so being able to show a coffee offer if you open the email in the morning and a Big Gulp offer if you open the email in the afternoon is something that we have already done to a certain extent, but we want to integrate that type of technology into these emails as well, so that just adds that extra layer of personalization. So again, really just trying to capture the attention of that loyalty member when they're on their phone, out and about, going about their day. And then our next step as a team and an organization is putting together a business plan for our capital project in 2021 to be able to automate data pools and to build those API triggers from our app to allow for more real-time response in our calls to customers based on their activities in our apps. But this test is what's going to get us there. To get that investment, we need to prove this out. We need to prove to our product partners and to our finance team partners that this really works and that it's worth that investment. So this was a big step for us. And I would say my biggest piece of advice is to not wait until all the stars align. Make progress with what's available to you now. It may not be the most ideal solution, but you can get to a more ideal solution. And that's our journey and the way that we've approached this. That is all I have.
Super great. Thank you, Marissa. Yeah, I'm intrigued by this one because we talked up front about kind of stepwise progression. How do you get started and where do you start, and then how do you progress over time from there? And what I think what I'm seeing here is that you guys did a thoughtful exercise. How do we deliver the right mix of and the right prioritization of offers and content to each user based on who they are, day part, etc.? And sounds like it started pragmatically. You came up with a program and a way to execute this that was doable by the organization today. And it sounds like some of the data flows are still batched. And and it sounds like you're still working on how to put a more responsive architecture into things, but you got to start. And you've clearly got goals, KPIs. I mean, this is, I think, a great illustration of a kind of moving into this in a stepwise way.
Exactly. And I would say, too, I think, in retrospect, I'm actually glad that it turned out this way, that we're doing it in this order, because I think we need to know what's working before we really start to sophisticate our Martech stack to solve these problems, right? Like, I don't want to solve for one thing and then start to test it and realize, oh, I really wish we had done it a different way. There's some things that are foundational and you're going to do it the same way no matter what. But what we prioritize and what we go after first and, how we think about personalization going forward, it's such a test and learn and an iterative process for us that I think we have to do it that way, because again, I mentioned this, earlier in the session, but there's so many different things that we could do. So we really have to prioritize what the right things are. And I think this is helping us to do that.
Very great. Yeah, super, super great illustration. Well, good. Maxine, let's turn over to you and hear the story of SailPoint.
Yeah, so I'm Maxine Eiland. I'm the Senior Director of Digital Marketing and Web at SailPoint. I joined about 3.5 years ago to really develop their digital program, rework their website. It was originally built as more of a branding type website because they were about to go public. And so I came in and, over the past few years have started to transform it more into a demand generation engine. So I fall under demand gen. And SailPoint is an identity governance company, as Rich mentioned, which most of you probably don't know what that is or have heard of us. But if you're a B2B company, we help you understand who your users are, what they're doing with that access, what data they have access to, and really help protect the data. And we say users, we mean not only just humans, but also bots. And we use a lot of machine learning to help figure out what those roles are, help IT, onboard and offboard a lot more effectively. And so we are kind of a key part of security that a lot of businesses aren't aware of the importance of. But one of the positives coming out of COVID is that has really emphasized the importance of what we do. So we're grateful for that. So I'm really excited to be here today to talk to you a little bit about how to build that best-in-class digital experience that, Faylene and Marissa have kind of spoke about. So you can go to the next slide, Vanessa. So it's very complex. And like Faylene mentioned, we don't want to pretend like it's easy to do the things that we're discussing today. It's actually very complicated, takes a lot of time. It's not something that happens in, a few months. It's something that over the course of years, you kind of build and you develop and you phase it out. And so building that, that best-in-class type experience, there's a few things that kind of go into that, being able to really identify, who it is that you're trying to go after. Who are the decision makers? I think there's roughly about 10 to 15 decision makers in, a process of bringing in a new platform or a solution. And, they range from, it could be an intern doing some research. It could be an IT decision maker, a mid-level one. It could be a C-level. And so really understanding who those people are that are looking at your content and looking at your brand, why they're looking at you, what are they searching for? What insights are they looking for? So that you can then tailor your messages and your content based on each one of those. And then ultimately deliver it to them in the right format they want, whether it be, a video, an article, a podcast even, and then being able to really measure the engagement so that you can improve it and repeat it and just continue to build a better experience each time. And so at SailPoint, about 2 years ago, we really started to invest in account-based marketing. And I know ABM is something that, people have been discussing for quite a while. But we've actually managed, I think, to really start developing a really great program. We actually brought in a team that just focuses on ABM, which I think is one of the reasons why we are as successful as we are with it. I think Marissa mentioned about resources earlier. If you don't bring things on with the right resources in place, you're not going to be able to, achieve some of the goals that you want to do. And so that's really helped us, build out this really great experience. And so one of the first things in that experience that, if you take a step back is really making sure that you have the right foundation in place, and asking yourself if you're set up to grow and evolve, is your data clean? Is it correct? A great example that, I have from SailPoint is, came in and I had to re-architect the whole website because it wasn't built very well. If you're having to Band-Aid fix things, it's not set up for success. It's not set up to grow. So, rebuilding your website in a way that you can layer things on top of it, not slow the website down. Those are all things that are foundational things that need to be built in before you even start, bringing in the right tools, right? And so when you're looking at your tools, you want to make sure that you're looking at ones that fit your business goals, and like I mentioned, the resourcing is really, really key, because if you don't have people to actually really effectively run those platforms, those tools, analyze the data, then, the tools are going to sit idly on a shelf and just not really be very efficient. And so once you have all the right tools in place, making sure that they all kind of talk to each other, making sure, understanding how the data is sent, how it's received and used, if somebody does one action, does it trigger something else? And so just really kind of understanding how they work together is really, really key. Vanessa, you can go to the next slide. And so your tech stack might look similar to this. This is just kind of an example of some kind of tools that are out there that are probably pretty key in the personalization realm. Of course, you have your analytics, whatever it might be. You have probably some social platforms that you're pulling some data from. You have, probably something like a Salesforce where it's a core function of all of your data. We use 6 Sense for our ABM. So that kind of does all of our intent data. It tells us, where they are in their buying journey, what account it is, et cetera. But ultimately at the core is data. And so having that one place where all of these different tools can connect to each other, they can, push and pull data in and out, and really be able to understand how an account, is functioning and interacting with your site. But also when it comes to the website, being on an individual basis is extremely important. Because as I mentioned, there's so many different levels of decision makers within that process that you want to make sure that you're tailoring everything accordingly. And so you don't want to serve up, ROI information to an intern because they don't understand what that might, tie into or why that's important. And the same with, a C-level, they maybe don't want to know all the super nitty-gritties yet. So I think it's kind of tying all of that data together in a more central repository so that you're able to accurately push your data around, and everybody's reading the same data. And one thing I like to point out is, just because you see a really great tool out there doesn't mean it's right for your organization. You have to make sure, again, it's staffed correctly. You have to make sure it fits in your tech stack appropriately. You have to make sure there's no overlap with that tool and other tools. So that's just a really great thing to kind of consider as you're bringing on a new platform. And I think it's really important to continuously audit your platforms, making sure that, they're effectively implemented, that they're still serving your business goals and things like that. Next slide, Vanessa. So as I mentioned, your data is what's going to drive the experience. At SailPoint, we've been able to, serve up content specific to things like the healthcare industry. So we're able to know if somebody's coming from healthcare and they are, on our website, we might change out the homepage for them. We might serve up a different chatbot experience for them, and just continuing to build that out so that the deeper that they are in the site and the more content and the more actions that they're taking on our website, we're able to continuously evolve that experience, because ultimately we want to shorten the sales cycle and push them into pipeline faster. And the best way to do that is to give them all the information they need at the forefront instead of having them try and go find it and, search all around the site for it. Next slide. And so, there's 3 kind of key takeaways I wanted y'all to have today. One of which being, again, going back to the data being clean, because again, your marketing efforts are only going to be as good as the data you have. If your contact data is, incorrect, if you don't have a way to understand if one contact is in multiple accounts or a contact has switched jobs, then you're having, you might be serving them up something for one industry, for example, and they might have moved on to another, or they may no longer be an IT decision maker in any kind of process having to do with your business. So making sure that you're able to, maintain that and monitor it is key, as well as making sure that, if there's any breakages in the data, do you have triggers set up to say, we're no longer, pulling or pushing data here, because that will be really, really helpful. You don't want to find out 6 months down the line that something's been broken and your data has been incorrect for 6 months, and you've been reporting on it to your, executives. That's a big no-no. And then secondly, that one source of data, making sure that everybody is using the same data. We're all, using one data warehouse. We started to, at SailPoint, we shifted over into one big data warehouse. And so everybody, is getting the data from the same place, no matter where they are in the company. And so that's really, really amazing. And I think, a huge effort, again, very complicated, very, very huge. But we're all able to run reports on the same thing, even within marketing, depending on the size of your marketing team, you may not, you want to make sure that you're having the same type of data. And then lastly, it's really making sure the integrations, again, are flowing effortlessly in real time, making sure you have those triggers set up. If an executive has been coming to your site, they've been engaging, maybe they chatted a little bit, they kind of downloaded a few things, and they've really been looking at some key content that's really, really important a little bit further down in that funnel, then, do you send them a muffin basket? Do you, do something else that really shows that personalization to them? And so ultimately, if your foundation and your tools and your data are all running correctly, you'll be able to really create those amazing experiences and build that kind of best-in-class experience. Thank you.
Very great. Thank you. So I've got a question, Maxine. I'm curious about, obviously you put a lot of emphasis here on the cleanliness of the data and kind of bringing the data together. And it sounds like maybe the pivotal pieces of that are the centralized data warehouse that you described. And I'm guessing 6sense. If you're using 6sense to capture customer intent, set up account-based marketing, I presume some CDP type functions. It sounds like those two are acting like a foundation, 6sense and the warehouse itself. Am I interpreting that right, or is there more you can eliminate there?
So we pull everything into Redshift, which is our big data warehouse. And so all of our data, because you have to consider marketing is not the only one that has data. Sales has data, you even have product has data, finance. So everybody in the company pushes their data into this one data warehouse so that we can accurately protect and make sure that our data is secure and compliant, which is extremely important for a cybersecurity company. Exactly. So that's kind of where everything is. So 6sense feeds into that, as well as our CDP feeds into that. And they all kind of work together. And so one key thing as well, when I say one source, is also making sure that where the true data lies for a specific thing. So, it doesn't necessarily have to be as complicated as a data warehouse, right? If Google Analytics is the primary source for traffic, you have to make sure that everybody goes into Google Analytics and get that information, right? It's not somebody else running a separate instance of Google Analytics or somebody else running a different instance of an analytics program. So you want to make sure that you have really pulled it all together. And that's something that, you know, when I came into SailPoint, I really tried to actively reach out to other people in the company to try to understand, you know, how are you pulling data for this website? And then I kind of pulled them in. And so now all of our Google Analytics are under one umbrella for all of our digital properties, whether it be our customer website, our developer portal, etc. And so I think that's another part of it. You don't have to be as complex as a data warehouse. It's just making sure that you're pulling the data from one single source, no matter what that source is.
Fair enough. Well, thank you. Great insights here. Let's kind of move ahead a slide then and kind of see if we can connect some dots. So this is a question for our experts. What do you see here? You know, think about the three different use cases or scenarios we heard. What commonalities do you see? What differences?
I mean, I think they all tie together so closely. You know, I think, you know, listening to Faylene and Marissa talk about, you know, their different experiences and their activities that they're doing, you know, it ultimately all ties into the data, the resourcing, the strategy, making sure that everything is in place in the right way. Because if it's not, then, you know, you're not going to be able to fully have the best go-to-market kind of strategy.
Fair enough. Thank you.
This is Marissa. I was going to say to Maxine's last point, I think for us, you know, while we're still pretty early on in all of this, the one thing we did do is get all of our data together into our data lake. And I think she's right. Like, without that, that's so foundational and so important. That's what has allowed us to even get started on this journey, really. So I think that's something I definitely see as a commonality in strategy.
Very good. For all the remaining participants, what commonalities do you see? Let's please post some comments in the chat. You know, what's similar here? What themes do you see? What differences do you see? How do these scenarios connect? I'd love to hear your thoughts and insight. Yeah, it seems like for each organization, you know, you have to get started somewhere. You know, how do you know, where do you start putting the first components in place to build traction? And then, but quickly, I think we heard a lot from you, Marissa, but then very quickly, how do you really harness this so you can start to expand and scale and make the process repeatable? And then that turns into very much oftentimes a data discussion. How do we get the data harnessed? And how do we do that better? So that was one thing I saw. Good deal. Why don't we move ahead a slide? Yeah, would love to hear. We'll capture some notes as we go here, but would love to hear you guys, your thoughts, guys, around if you have advice for our participants here as to what's the most important thing you need to think about when you're moving into a personalization challenge. What advice would you share?
I think I'll just jump in because I'll piggyback off of what you just said, Rich. If you're, you know, brand new to the personalization world and just trying to, you know, dip a toe in, if you will, I think, you know, get scrappy, you know, test and try and just, you know, try to do an A/B test. You know, you don't necessarily need a big fancy tool, but you can do some scrappy tests with just a really great developer if you have one. I'm fortunate I have 4. But, you know, if you have a developer that is really strong, they can come in, they can do some, you know, JavaScript queries, some calls, and just, you know, do some really, really small, you know, personalization things. And it could be a local thing, you know, based on IP and, you know, not even a count or anything like that, but just some simple things to just pull some insights for and just see, hey, did this actually, you know, cause more of an engagement of when I did this. There's also some much more simpler like A/B testing tools out there. We started doing A/B testing with VWO, which I think is now Wingify, which is like, you know, I think it was $15,000 a year or something like that. So, you know, there's some tools out there that are very a little bit cheaper and could fit your your actual, resource limitations that you might have, and be able to really implement quick and fast.
Good deal. Sounds like iteration, then get started and then start iteratively building. Maybe that's a key word too, if I'm reading you right.
Yeah.
Good thoughts. Marissa, what's your kind of top line advice for folks?
I think that is along the same lines as what I was thinking, just in terms of, not expecting that everything's going to be perfect to start. So that's definitely a big one. I would say the other is just involving all of the key stakeholders and all of the different teams that are involved up front as early as possible to understand what dependencies exist, to understand the gaps, really kind of get a full view of the entire landscape, especially from our perspective. We have just a lot of different people involved. We have the actual loyalty team that we have to work with. We have the 7 Now delivery team that we work with, all of our merchant partners, as well as our strategy insights. So a lot of people involved for something that feels like it should be simpler than that, but it's not. It's going to be complicated from that perspective. But if you get all those inputs early, then you can really start to kind of build from there.
Perfect. Thank you. Good. Let's kind of move ahead. I think we can. We have a couple minutes for questions, and I would encourage everybody again, if you have a question, let's put it up in the chat, and we can at least hit some questions and process those together. While everybody's putting some in the chat, I'll mention one thing that's on my mind, and this might be something that Maxine or Marissa, you might respond to. By the way, I think Faylene got pulled away. Something came up and she got pulled away. So, sorry she wasn't able to stay on. I'm curious about the data. So, from a martech perspective, we see an awful lot of buzz, especially the last 2 years, around customer data platforms, CDPs, and great big promises from the CDP providers around how you can harness all your data, bring it together, capture insights, provision audiences. And so, Maxine or Marissa, I'm not sure if this is something you would want to comment on, or we might get some commentary from the broader group here. But I'm wondering if there's any for the whole group here, and any insights to share around that.
Well, we just brought on our CDP, and so we're in the kind of the initial implementation phases of it. And I think, just in considering, my background, I've been kind of in the personalization world for about 10 years. I've been doing some level of personalization for at least 10 years. And I think this is the first time that I've been able to really see tools actually live up to what they say they can do. I think in the past, I depended a lot on just code-based things to do a lot of personalization. But the reason we brought on an actual CDP and tool that, can do a lot more of not just personalization, but a lot of the data kind of control and reading and machine learning associated with it is because they're actually doing what they can, that they could never do before. And I think that's really pivotal in kind of thinking about, should I bring on a CDP or not? But again, I'm bringing on somebody that will just focus on helping with the CDP, so that I'm not bringing on a CDP and bringing on something of that magnitude and assuming that my team can handle it, because they can't. So a tool of that size means you also need to be bringing on at least one person that's dedicated to it, if not over time, building that out into more. Because what happens is the more that the CDPs, their machine learning comes in and they learn and they start creating things, and before you know it, you have 30,000 campaigns running on an individual basis. And then that's just too much for one person to be able to handle, right? And so you can get as granular as you want, or you can get, as high level as you want with some of your campaigns and with some of your, personalization. And so I think those are some key things, but I'm excited, to really see how it starts to transform our experiences on the web, and not just the web, but, email, ads, et cetera, and other trigger points for the experience.
Yeah, super interesting. I'm curious to hear how that plays out for SailPoint, Maxine. And I kind of contrast that with what Faylene shared. Faylene shared that they're using the Adobe stack very heavily, Adobe Experience Manager, and I presume some of the Adobe components, Target, etc., for provisioning audiences and managing audiences. And I believe there was a DMP that played a central role in the whole concept she shared. So, and there's using like a big platform like Adobe very extensively. Sounds like you're bringing some, possibly best of breed tools together for your business. And that's something that's very intriguing to me.
Yeah, and by the way, there is not somebody that is I should say there's not, but it would be extremely hard pressed to find somebody that's a CDP expert, because that's such a new thing in marketing. So, when I was looking at somebody to help manage this, I'm looking for somebody with a very heavy research background that can dig into data, that can really analyze things. And that's somebody, those are kind of the key things that I'm looking for. And so what you look for might be a little bit different. But just know that if you put out a resume for a CDP expert, you might get some interesting resumes associated with that.
I'm not a bit surprised. And that's an interesting insight. CDP still feel like the Wild West to me. Really hitting radar big in 2018 and 2019. And yet, we talk to a ton of organizations at Ascend and serve a number of organizations. You're hard pressed to find anyone that really says, we have our arms around our CDP, it's running silky smooth. More often we hear about organizations in a learning curve or a tech adoption curve. Marissa, I'm curious if this is part of the conversation at 7-Eleven, or is this not yet part of the dialogue there?
We've started to talk about a CDP. Right now, it's just our data lake, and that is a manual pull from the data lake into Salesforce from the CRM perspective. As we think about web, I've been working with that team, our web team, to think about a CDP and what that could look like as we start to kind of bring all of the pieces together. So we're exploring that. I think that's part of, the business case we're also making for 2021 and how we build on our Martech stack, but we do not have one right now. So.
Good deal. Interesting. And I'm seeing some questions from the chat talking about pressures on data lake and data quality. How do you leverage data to personalize? How do you manage audiences in and around these kind of tools? I think hopefully we're speaking directly, or at least close into some of the questions we're hearing in the chat as well. But we are to a quarter of now, so we should probably shift gears into kind of summarization mode here, and let's kind of share a bit about where Martechify is going next. So thank you, panelists, and I think that Kyle and Vanessa, it's back to you.
All right, so we welcome all feedback. Thank you, first of all. Great discussion today. Really appreciate it. And again, in the chat or just via email, would love to hear just any thoughts and feedback. And if you guys would like materials as well. So we'll be preparing a recording of this that we can send out. If you guys have members of your team who weren't able to make it today. What we want this to be is a destination. We want this to be a place where you can find kind of the resources that you need. So we'll be adding this to the website and building out some additional website content to support that as well. As we said before, this is ongoing. This is not just a one and done event. So we want these topics to kind of build on each other. So as we especially start thinking about, what does 2021 look like for marketing and just for the world in general, we wanted to set our next event to really be focused on that. So Vanessa, if you want to move to the next slide. We'll go from there. November 19th is what we have tentatively scheduled right now for taking a look at content marketing. How do you strategize for 2021? And how do you best kind of build a strategy around that? So we have the RSVP link up right now. If you guys are interested in RSVPing for our next session, Vanessa will ping that to the chat. So I'll kick it over now to Angela to talk a little bit about some things coming up for DFW AMA.
Thank you so much. Awesome. So what we have coming up next is our community engagement initiative, which essentially is our give back initiative to the small and medium businesses in the Dallas-Fort Worth community that have really struggled as a result of COVID-19. So registration is open on Monday, the 26th. If you're interested in sponsorships, definitely reach out at info@amadfw.com. And also next week, if you can go to the next slide, we have our October virtual luncheon. We have luncheons every month. And this is perfect timing, especially after today's Martech topic. Basically, moving from uncertainty to opportunity with creative thinking. This is a highly engaged workshop luncheon format, and we have Marta Villanueva, the Chief Insights Officer of New Thinking. And that's from 12 to 1, and you can also register for that. And I want to add, too, that we're excited to continue this partnership with Ascend Marketing for continued Martech SIGs and other events as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Angela. I just want to echo again, Dallas-Fort Worth AMA and Angela have been wonderful partners so far in helping to boost the awareness and really just bring together a great session for everybody. So thank you, Angela. So again, I mentioned before, November 19th is when we're thinking of our next session. So taking a look at content marketing, strategizing for 2021 and putting the pieces together for that. So December, I know holiday season will kind of give everyone a break, but as we start to talk about, what does Martechify look like in 2021, it gets even bigger than right now. So a couple things that had come up, I guess, in the last session was just the need to kind of do a little bit more focused deep dive. So kind of taking a look at, and Vanessa, if you want to go to the next slide, taking a look at just kind of a couple, I would say, broader challenges. So we mentioned a lot of components of tech stacks today, but we know that, for different organizations are at very different stages in terms of just Martech. It was kind of the intention of Martechify to help usher in that transition to kind of deeper marketing, as you heard today. So a couple topics that we're looking to do in 2021, just a marketing automation platform crash course. So just really getting feet set to just understand what this is in the first place. And then if you're in the solutioning stage and really don't know where to begin or just would like some information, kind of taking a look at what does what in the space, we prepared some information as well for a platform comparison. So we can take a look at both of those. So again, if you guys want to take a look at martechify.com, or if you have any questions or would like more of a private session, feel free to reach out and we can definitely put together some materials to support that. So thank you. And I'll kick it back to Rich to kind of close this out. But to our experts, thank you so much. To all of the participants, really appreciate you guys joining us this morning and look forward to seeing you at our next one.
You bet. And my thanks as well, everybody. Thank you again to our expert panel. Great job. Thank you for all your great preparation. Super good. Thanks for everybody who joined. And Kyle's invitation to give us feedback, please take that seriously. We are actively now shaping the calendar for Q1 and for all of 21. And expect that we'll probably have at least 6 large forums like you're part of today. And then in between, we'll have deep dive sessions that can go multiple places. We're very, very actively seeking input and ideas. What would be relevant? And again, our goal is to build out a community of thought-leading professionals in and around advanced marketing and Martech. So let us know what's relevant for you, and we will do our best to try to shape the calendar in a way that serves the community best. Okay, well, thanks again. I guess we'll sign off for today. We really appreciate everybody's participation.
Thanks so much.